Pastor Lutzer of Running to Win, heard daily on Bible School Radio, 91.3 KDKR, Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC, Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, the Federal Reserve Board took action today. Was it the right step? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. The number to call if you'd like to join in on the program is 1-877-913-5357, 1-877-913-5357. You can also go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com and send a question in through the Ask Bob section. And I will get that. There you go. Then I'll get that taken care of. I was trying to set the computer up. So that's off the website, www.prudentmoney.com. 1-877-913-5357. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. The Federal Reserve Board, let me say it better the second time, was meeting today and trying to decide on what the appropriate response to banks that are failing and inflation, which we've been dealing with now for a pretty long time. Typically, as you know, what the Federal Reserve Board does, they're in charge of interest rates, and they've been raising interest rates for a little over a year. I heard that today, and I thought it was a lot longer, but I guess it is a little over a year. And 10 different times that they've raised interest rates. They've got the key interest rate up over 5%. Now, they also made a very they didn't come straight out and say it, but they hinted about it, and that's what the market likes to see. Is they hinted that the tightening was over. Now, this is where I think the Federal Reserve Board is going to run into a real problem because, I hate to say this, inflation is still where it is. It seems like it's still where it's been for the past year to year and a half, and it just hasn't budged much. We've talked about that is probably the biggest problem for consumers today, is not a higher inflation rate, because I don't think we're going to go any higher than we are right now, but one that just kind of stagnates, it doesn't go anywhere. And as I've said before, the Federal Reserve Board can raise interest rates all they want, and I just don't think they're going to really affect inflation rates on the downside, push them down, get pricing back to where it's a little bit more like it was before COVID hit. Now, I don't think, and this is the tough part of it, I don't think that we're ever going to see prices back down again, back to where COVID was. But, they're in an interesting situation because inflation has really not moved. So what is the answer to inflation? And we've talked about this many times in the program. And it comes down to the damage that will potentially be done to the economy because of all of the interest rates raises is what could ultimately bring inflation down. Because it comes down to supply and demand. Consumer right now is faced with a short supply, a small supply, and a high demand for different products and services. So the prices are high. But I do believe they're going to be relying on the economy to do the rest of the work. What they can't afford to do, they can't afford to stop cutting rates and then have to start back again. I think today the reason we didn't see a pause today where they stopped, they didn't raise it one more time, and a quarter of a percent, I don't think really moves the needle of an interest rate rise. It's probably more psychological than anything when it comes right down to it. But I think if they would have paused, they would have been telling the entire world that, hey, we are very, very concerned, not really about this inflation as much as about it as a banking crisis. In fact, the Fed's own economists at the March FOMC meeting warned that a shallow recession is likely due to the banking issues. Now, this is what I don't really understand. What makes no sense. Of course, most of this makes no sense if you really look at it. But what doesn't make any sense is that our economy is not taking really any hit because of 3 banks that have gone down. And they're talking about warning a shallow recession, and they never, it's never a big recession. It's always a small one or a shallow one that will just kind of come through and do its thing and go away, is due to banking issues. Well, once again, when you have all of the depositors being made whole, which has happened, then what's wrong with the economy? The economy hadn't taken had any problems at all. But what a report that I'm going to go over here in a little bit talks about, there might be a lot of banks in trouble. Of course, consumers are going to be affected through general interest rate increases on consumer loans. They're also going to be affected, the consumer and the small business owner, in the inability to get funding for loans. Bank lending is going to tighten up. We're already starting to see that. Now, that is because of probably because of the banking issues. But I saw it was kind of sad because the company's been around for over 40 years. But Jenny Craig announced they were shutting down today. And one of the key reasons they couldn't get financing. And that's one of the things that these companies, they count on, is the ability to borrow money to help them through a critical time. And if there's no money to borrow, then they end up going under, or they end up having to close the doors, which is what happened to Jenny Craig today. So, interesting situation. I think that the one thing that should be getting everybody's attention, and we've talked about this, is that 3 banks have become insolvent, been taken over by the federal government, and somehow or another, all 3 of them, every depositor got made whole. That's not the way FDIC was meant to work, and I wonder how much that is. At the end of the day, there was I had a author on who last week who was talking about the Great Depression and the fact that the government didn't come in and take over banks and didn't rescue the economy like the Federal Reserve is rescuing the economy today, was the reason that the Great Depression was so severe, and probably because it happened. And they'll also make the argument that during the financial crisis, the entire world economic system probably would have come crashing down. But at some point, they're putting off the things they need to do, which is stop bailing people out and bring companies get stronger on their own without the help of and make it come back, and then some will go out of business because they probably not a viable business to begin with. Until we get to that point, how much damage are we doing already? So it's a tough situation, obviously, for it's all self-induced with the way with all the debt and everything that's going on. But that is the way it is, and we'll continue to keep you posted on that as the story develops. 1-877-913-5357. That is the number to call, and I do have a line open. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Last week I talked about Apple releasing, they've got a credit card. I'm not sure how many people have the credit card, but there's a credit card, and it's been pretty successful. And now they are going to add another banking type service, which is a high yield savings account, which is like 4.2%. And by the way, savings accounts should go up even some more because of today's interest rate rise. But this one's, I think this is at 4.2%. And I was talking about this is going to hurt the big banks because the big banks just cannot offer these kinds of savings accounts. And what you're seeing money flow out of the big banks to the places like the Fidelities and the Vanguards of the world, to where you can get better interest rates on your savings or emergency fund money. Get this, Apple reportedly attracted $1 billion in deposits into their new high-yield savings account in just 4 days. Now, of course, $1 billion compared to what's in some of these banks is nothing, but that was just in 4 days. And I really haven't heard a big marketing push for this as of yet, just an article here and there. But without really trying, and they've got, of course, the infrastructure of customers that they have, they could easily probably attract billions and billions of dollars worth of money that once again will flow out of the banking system, and not at a good time, and into these companies, and into Apple, into their high yield savings account. Who would have ever thought that Apple would have a credit card and Apple would have a high yield savings account? Probably the credit card more so than the high yield savings account, but interesting things for sure. 1-877-913-5357. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around. I'll be right back.
The Word for Today is excited to announce the new official online home for the ministry of Pastor Chuck Smith and Kay Smith, pastorchuck.org. At pastorchuck.org, you'll have instant access to thousands of hours of verse-by-verse teaching by Pastor Chuck Smith from Genesis through Revelation, and full access to special messages on subjects such as prophecy and much, much more. Also at pastorchuck.org, a full library of great teachings by Kay Smith, and a section where you can read some of Pastor Chuck's books online, all free of charge. So visit the new official online home of the Word for Today and the ministry of Pastor Chuck and Kay Smith, pastorchuck.org.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
We can't have our way and God's way. That's the truth Dr. J. Vernon McGee shares this week on Through the Bible. If you're in need of comfort, or maybe someone you know is struggling and you're not sure how to help, you can join our study of 2 Corinthians as we discover the truth about God's comfort.
Listen daily, 6:30 p.m. on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. 1-877-913-5357. Do have a line open, and I'd love to hear from you today, whatever is on your mind. We're talking about Apple having credit cards and having now savings accounts, getting into the banking business pretty strongly there. And just saw that a friend of mine just texted me and said, hey, I got an Apple card. And so I'm sure that There's a lot of them out there. 1-877-913-5357. Now, here is a report that came out, and this is what surely the market knows this. Surely the powers to be know this, but it's not something we talk about. If this is true, this is not good. It says half of America's bank, and by the way, this is from a vetted source. It's not from from an email that you're probably getting today that tells you the world's coming to an end. Half of America's banks are potentially insolvent. This is how a credit crunch begins. It says the twin crashes in U.S. commercial real estate and the U.S. bond market have collided with $9 trillion of uninsured deposits in the American banking system. Such deposits can vanish in an afternoon in the cyber age. You know, it's interesting because we've talked about there's a lot of events that have happened. Let me put it this way. There's a lot of events that have happened that we haven't seen the downside to it yet. We've seen the event happen, and you're just wondering, okay, what's going to become of this event, because this event's not a good one. You had the bond market is enormous. It's like 40. I'm not even sure. I'm not even going to guess it. I mean, it's enormous. It's not as big as the stock market, but it's nearly as big as the stock market. And last year the bond market took the biggest loss in the history of the bond market. The year before, the bond market took a loss. And you just can't, it's like nothing really has happened. Well, it's a good thing, but it makes you wonder what's leaking, what is around the corner that could happen because the bond market has taken such a hit. And then this, of course, I haven't really seen this play out, if it is, but the article talks about the twin crash, the other crash in the U.S. commercial real estate. Statistics I've seen show that has not developed yet, but is on its could be around the corner. It says a Hoover Institution report by Professor Siru, I think that's how you say his name, and a group of banking experts calculates that more than 2,315 U.S. banks are currently sitting on assets worth less than their liabilities. So I've heard almost 1,800 banks are in the same condition, the same position the Silicon Valley Bank was in before it went under. This report suggests 2,315 banks. Either number is not a good number, but this says are currently sitting on assets. So it's saying that their assets, their liabilities are much higher than their assets to pay them off. And then it says the market value of their loan portfolios is $2 trillion lower than the stated book value. That is very significant. Let me explain to you what that means. It means that they have things like, this is what Silicon Valley Bank went through, is that they had all of these bonds in their portfolios, the bank portfolio, that had taken a huge hit when interest rates took off. Remember, when interest rates go up, bond prices go down, and they had to realize those losses and announce that those losses were there. That's really started the problem. This is saying the market value of their loan portfolios, these 2,315 banks, is $2 trillion lower than the stated book value. So let's say that you're investing in a bank that you were looking at the bonds and the investments of this bank, and they were, let's just say that they were at $10 a share, or they're worth $10 a share. Let's say that they had to fully value them and they're actually only, if they sold them today, that portfolio of bonds or investments in the bank would be worth $4. Now it's a pretty extreme move, 10 to 4, but you get the idea. $4 of value versus 10. What that causes is bank Wall Street to say, "Ooh, wait a minute. That means if that's the case, then the value of the company's gone way down, and the stock's going to get hit. And the stock gets hit, and the value of the company is now a lot less than it was the day before." That's when you have depositors going, "Maybe I shouldn't keep my money in this bank." And this is the thing: is that the banks that are potentially in trouble, and this just kind of highlights the problem that we face. The banks that are potentially in trouble it's no secret. I mean, it's Wall Street knows it. It's just not discussed, not announced. I mean, there's 2 or 3 banks that are, CNBC, that are kind of on bank watch during in the stock. There's their shares of stock and the value that's going up and down. Didn't see much of movement today. Did yesterday. A couple of banks. One was lost 16% in their share value, and one lost to 28% in their share value, and it was a lot lower earlier in the day. But the problem is that there's something that shows that, hey, this bank's in trouble. Their liabilities are worth way more than their assets, and the stock, the bank starts to go way down. Then that prompts social media to start the buzz and talking about, well, what's wrong with the bank? Information starts to come out, and then you've got people moving large amounts of money from the bank into other institutions just by the use of a computer at home. So you don't have, back in the 1920s when there was a run on the banks during the Great Depression, you had people lined up, banging on the doors of the bank, "Let me in, give me my money." Of course, these banks are shut down. And now it's just a matter of how much money can I transfer electronically, and you get that going, and that can start into a widespread situation given the number of banks that we're potentially talking about. And that's why this article says that such deposits can vanish in an afternoon in the cyber age. And, as the Federal Reserve Board, as the government, as the FDIC all work together to basically make everything whole on the losses of these 3 banks, they can't continue to keep doing that. I guess they could announce that the banking system was now nationalized and was covered and backed by the United States government. They could do that, but even then, I just wonder how deeper a banking crisis would go, even given that surety. So this report does say that these lenders include some of the big banks, which is kind of a little bit of surprising. One of the 10 most vulnerable banks is a globally systemic entity with assets over $1 trillion. 3 other large banks are also involved in this report. So it's not just everybody's talked about how this is all about the regional banks, the smaller banks, and not really. This is about some of the big banks as well. So we'll see what happens, and I'll keep you posted. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Hey, I want to invite you to go to the website, and as I've been talking about the website's we've slowly been, we'll just say, remodeling it a little bit at a time, and we've almost got it to right where we want it. And I think it's a good reference place, a good resource for you to go to get information. We've got the podcast there. I got the blogs there. I'm writing what I think that you need to hear about. We're posting on social media as far as articles. I think there. In fact, I posted this one today on Facebook. If you want to go read about this article that we were just talking about, where the 2,315 banks are pretty close to being insolvent. But also the Ask Bob section. And what I want to hear from you is simply this. 2 things. 1, what is working and what is not working for you financially? Because if you can take what is working for you and improve upon that, that makes it even better. But if something's not working, let's get it fixed. So you can go to Ask Bob, send that information in to me when I can talk to you through the email and see if I can help you out. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Well, this is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.